Hi everyone, this is Laelie again with another Innominatus 10-man video guide from the Dragon Soul raid on the patch 4.3 PTR. This video will outline the strategy to defeating Warlord Zon'ozz. This fight was recorded in a pug, but the abilities and strategies outlined are reflected in this video. This fight is in no way finished and could change before it reaches the live realms. Warlord Zon'ozz is the third boss encounter in the Dragon Soul raid. He is located in the Maw of Gorath, which can be reached by flying on a green drake from the bottom of Wormrest Temple. You will parachute in commando style and land in a safe area inside. There will be 3 packs of tentacle trash that you must deal with, and once the trash is dead, you will engage Warlord Zon'ozz. In this fight, your raid will need 1 tank, 3 healers, and 6 DPS. The healing requirements in the second phase of this encounter require 3 healers to deal with the heavy incoming damage. Your raid should try to find a balance of melee and ranged DPS to deal with the mechanics of this encounter. Because of the necessity of having a ranged group, it is not advised to bring more than 3 melee. This is an encounter with 2 phases that alternate until the boss is dead. The first phase is a coordination phase where your raid will be bouncing a ball of energy back and forth between a melee group and a ranged group. This positioning will be explained in greater detail later in this guide. During the second phase, the boss takes increased damage and deals a massive amount of raid damage that must be healed through. Healers and tanks should use their healing and damage reduction cooldowns. DPS cooldowns should also be safe for this phase. I will go over the abilities for this fight and will then outline a strategy to handle those abilities. Phase 1. Warlord Zon'ozz will put a buff called Focused Anger on himself, which increases his physical damage done by 10% and his attack speed by 10%. This effect will stack every 5 seconds until he is diffused. I will explain how to diffuse Zon'ozz later in this guide. Zon'ozz will also cast an ability called Psychic Drain approximately once every 30 seconds. This ability will cast a wave of psychic force in a 30-yard cone in front of him, which deals 120,000 shadow damage and leeches life equal to 10 times the amount of damage that he deals. This means he gains approximately 1.2 million health each time he does this ability, provided that it only hits the tank. An ability called Disrupting Shadows will also be cast on 1 to 3 random raid members every 30 seconds. This magic effect will inflict about 36,000 shadow damage every 2 seconds to the player. When dispelled, it deals about 60,000 shadow damage and knocks the player back about 10 yards. So it is best to dispel it as soon as possible, provided it will not kill that particular raid member. At the beginning of Phase 1, Zon'ozz will also cast Void of the Unmaking. He spawns an orb of purple energy in front of him and sends it straight ahead towards the wall of the room. The key to this phase is properly using this ball to prevent Zon'ozz from killing your tank. When the Void of the Unmaking collides with the player, it will use Void Diffusion, which explodes, dealing 180,000 shadow damage, which is split between all raid members near the Void at the time. The Void will also ricochet away from the player it hit and head back in the opposite direction. Each of these collisions will increase the damage the Void deals by 20% on the next diffusion. If the Void is allowed to hit the wall of the room, the Maw of Gorath will use Black Blood Eruption, which deals 60,000 shadow damage to all raiders and knocks them into the air. This cannot be allowed to happen. Zon'ozz will become diffused when the Void collides with him. This diffusion will cause Zon'ozz to take 5% extra damage for every time the Void has bounced between players. This diffusion will also cause his stacks of Focused Anger to drop. However, diffusing Zon'ozz will also transition into Phase 2, where Zon'ozz awakens the Maw of Gorath. Phase 2. In this phase, the room becomes very dark and many tentacles, including Eyes of Gorath, will spawn around the whole area. Zon'ozz will use Black Blood of Gorath, which inflicts about 14,000 shadow damage to all players every second for 30 seconds. At the same time, the Eyes of Gorath will use Shadow Gaze, which will inflict 28,000 shadow damage to about 2 raid members every 3 seconds. After 30 seconds, Zon'ozz will transition back and Phase 1 will begin again. Now that we have the abilities for this fight, I will outline the strategy to defeating this encounter. Here's our encounter strategy. Your raid should be divided into 2 groups, 1 range group and 1 melee group. Your range group should consist of 1 to 2 healers and the rest a ranged DPS. The range group should have 5 members and the melee group should have 4 members. If you are very low on range DPS, you may opt to have only 4 members in your range group. On the pole, your melee group and tanks should face Zon'ozz, while your range group is positioned at a 90-degree angle from the boss. Your raid may choose whichever side you would like for this, but this video shows our range group position to the left of the boss. Your tank should run through the boss and turn him around so the boss is facing away from both the melee and range groups. The encounter begins in Phase 1, and the first Void of the Unmaking will spawn shortly after the pull. As soon as Zon'ozz spawns the Void, have your tank rotate the boss 90 degrees clockwise if your range group starts on the left. Otherwise, if your range group starts on the right, have your tank turn the boss 90 degrees counterclockwise. Your melee group should then reposition themselves behind the boss, and your range group will have to chase after the orb. This positioning will prevent everyone except the tank from being hit by Psychic Drain. After the Void of the Unmaking spawns, it will head directly away from Zon'ozz. Your range group should chase after the Void and make sure to collide with it. This may require the use of movement abilities to intercept the first bounce. The Void will then ricochet, and if your range group was positioned properly, head back towards your melee group. Your melee group must then intercept the orb and aim the Void back to the range group. For a moderately geared group, your group will want to defuse the Void 5 times in order to maximize your damaging ability in Phase 2. If your group is more geared, you may wish to ricochet the orb 7 times if your tank can survive the increased damage from the extra stacks of Focused Anger. Healers need to be aware of the damage being done by the diffusion. It is also important to time dispels appropriately in order to make sure a diffusion and a dispel do not occur simultaneously and kill a raid member. One healer should be tank healing and the other 2 healers should be dispelling and healing their respective groups. Once your group has bounced the Void enough times, your melee group should make sure to get completely clear of the Void, and your tank will want to position the boss so that the Void will directly connect with Zon'ozz rather than hitting the tank or another raider. Your range group should follow the Void in toward the center and stack up with the melee group. In Phase 2, your raid will stack up directly behind Zon'ozz. Healers and tanks should arrange raid cooldowns for the 30 seconds of the phase, as your raid will endure massive AoE damage. But, do not forget that the tank and Shadow Gaze targets will need extra healing as well. After 30 seconds, the fight will return to Phase 1. It is important to note that at the beginning of Phase 1, Zon'ozz will not spawn a Void of the Unmaking for about 15 to 20 seconds. Just DPS the boss, dispel, and wait until he spawns the Void. Use Heroism at or below 40% during Phase 2 in order to maximize its effectiveness. Zon'ozz is all about coordination and large throughput on both the parts of your healers and DPS. Once you have mastered the art of Void bouncing, your raid will quickly defeat Zon'ozz. I will show the fight in its entirety so you can see the phases and abilities in action. Put on your Sunday dresses and have fun.